What is up, wrestling fans, and welcome to the Smark Out Moment Smack Talk podcast. And it's the Paul Heyman SmackDown podcast, where we're on episode 4 now for the July 18th, 2002 episode of SmackDown. I'm your host, as always, for these editions, Callum Wiggins, and joining me, as always, Robert DeFelice.
Callum, here we are again, back in the DeLorean, back in 2002. The world looks different.
It looks it looks better, I feel. I don't know if it looks entirely better, but it's definitely better than 2020.
It's definitely better than 2020.
It's odd that like a number that contains all the same numbers as 2020 can be so markedly different and so much more entertaining.
I think that says that order is important.
So this is a big episode. There's a lot of change happening on this one. The previous episode we covered, episode 3. Hopefully you're checking all the episodes in order. Hopefully you're liking the video right now and you're leaving some comments below with your thoughts of this episode, or you're like hitting a favourite on the podcast feeds or whatever you can do on those platforms. If you haven't watched the episode, you can check out the link down in the YouTube video in the description, linking you to this episode in the WWE Network. But hopefully you are engaging with it. But the previous episode wasn't really that much of a super special. It was a by the numbers episode. This one is historic, to say the least.
You know, I think as we look at this show, and you'd mentioned in the last one, we're entering an era that's going to be well over a decade with general managers. And we start off with probably maybe the two best general managers the brands have ever had.
Yeah, I think Teddy Long and his tag team matches might have something to
yeah, that's why I
that.
hesitated. But I definitely think Raw, from a GM perspective, was never better than Eric Bischoff. They tried.
No, I completely agree with that.
They tried a handful of others. Bischoff just tied it together perfectly. But Bischoff's introduction, and as he was, battling who we're going to talk about later in this show, that was so much fun to watch as a kid.
So, a very newsworthy week, very newsworthy couple of shows, but we'll talk about, before we get into the meat of what Raw was up to, what SmackDown was up to, let's talk about the big story, which is that Eric Bischoff is in WWE, and he's been named the Raw General Manager, sealed with the hug where hell froze over between Vince and Eric. You already talked about what are your kind of memories of this moment. Like, did you know too much about the war that was going on and why this was a historic moment at the time?
So I definitely knew. So I was a wrestling fan always, and we weren't much channel flippers in my house, but I was very aware of WCW, specifically the NWO and Eric Bischoff's involvement in that. I wouldn't realize until I was a little bit older that Bischoff was genuinely running things in WCW and genuinely, trying to take down McMahon. But that hug, it's so good because it's the perfect Vince McMahon overacting, I love it, and this is a great moment. And JR and King, perfect two people on the call because they were legitimately in the booth and in the war room with Vince, damning WCW for nearly taking them apart.
This was another attempt to try and revive the failing brand split. So having general managers put into it was meant to be a way of Vince getting himself away from the television product, but trying to jazz it up still and give him something a little bit different. The Bischoff signing was not exactly met with total favour by people behind the scenes who either worked for WCW under Bischoff and so weren't exactly the biggest fans of him due to the shit show that ended up being in its final years, or that they worked for WWF the entire time and they saw Bischoff as the enemy, had been drilled into them. Bischoff is the enemy, he's trying to run you out of business, and now he's in the company.
I'm willing to bet that all those reasons and more made Vince sign Eric faster.
So Bischoff's initial contract was only believed to have been short term. I think Bischoff describes it himself as he was in it for as long as it was interesting. So as soon as, if people decided to tire of his character or he got bored of it, he would be out of there, which was interesting because most people that were signed to WWE at the time, because they were the only company around, the only company of any note in North America, people were being signed to pretty long-term contracts. So the fact that Bischoff came in and was pretty much could have only been there for a couple of months if things had turned out differently was just an interesting way of looking at things. And his contract was only to have him as a performer, not as either a producer or a creative backstage.
And he never ever is, except for
A
in
short stint in 2019.
2019. Yeah, and it's not very long at all. But I'll give Bischoff credit for this. You mentioned as long as the character is interesting, and for my money, he only gets stale for a few months before they completely remove him. So I think he really does follow through on that promise.
Yeah, I think, like you say, Bischoff is the the not I guess like the optimal general manager for the Raw brand throughout its the entire run of this general manager thing. I mean, when you look at the competition is Steve Austin, who did it alongside Eric Bischoff, Mick Foley, who also did it alongside Eric Bischoff and was very, very short term. Who was following Bischoff?
So that was like during the weird period of time where Vince was fighting DX, so he was just on the show,
Mm,
and occasionally they would have Coach as the authority.
yeah, so Vince basically
Not
came back
great.
into Raw. Yeah. And then you have people like Vicky Guerrero in charge of Raw. You have Mike Adamle.
Mike
The
Adamle, now, I don't know, we're never going to get another chance to talk about Mike Adamle on this or any other Spark Out Moment podcast, so I feel like this is a good place to mention it. But he was a great experiment for what the GM role is, which is just, we need a guy in a suit.
Yeah. I mean, he was far better as the general manager role than he was
As a
in the
commentator.
commentary, yeah. And obviously, we've learned a lot more about the reasons why that was probably the case in the
Yeah,
years
that
that
gets
followed
better.
it. But so there is a very valid explanation for it, but Jeff Harvey, man,
Yeah, I think Adam Lee, was he the last, like, traditional GM? Because I think
he
up
was after
until,
Regal, right?
yeah, he was after Regal. Regal was good, but the suspension cuts it short.
I
So
think
really,
Laurinaitis would still count as a GM. He was he was definitely after Adam,
oh, because after Adam Lee, don't we get into the weird, like,
the guest hosts.
yeah, oh, awful. So we have the guest host, that goes into the anonymous GM. Out of that, we go back to like this gray area, and I think that's where like you have Vince on the show, you have Hunter on the show in his new COO role. You got AJ is in there for like a month or two, and that was always weird to me. And then I think after AJ, it becomes we're just gonna merge the brands until the proper brand split in
Yeah.
2016.
And we have the authority, and now we're in this weird time frame for the first time ever where there's really no authority figure in either Raw or SmackDown.
But they're oddly transparent about who is actually pulling the strings behind the scenes.
But that might be a better way of doing it. I mean, that's the way that kind of AEW operates as well, because they reference the fact that Tony Khan is the one that makes the decisions, but you don't see Tony Khan on TV ever.
Yeah, I think that's good, and I think it's good that you don't see Bruce Pritchard as a character on Raw or SmackDown.
The other big news story was that WWE cut their ties with the Heartland Wrestling Association, which meant that
Interesting.
OVW became their one and only developmental territory.
The HWA being the training ground of John Moxley.
So this involved the cutting of a number of wrestlers at this point in time as well, including, and some of these names I'm not familiar with, so just carve them, but some of them have some note to them. So Steve Bradley, Jason Broyles, who's also known as Easy Money in ECW, John Heidenreich, who would eventually
Oh,
get re-signed with the company a couple of years later, and how great
very
that turned
weird.
out.
Great, is that what we're calling it?
Mike Sanders, who was with WCW for a while, BJ Payne, Mike Balea, Horace Hogan.
Boy, you know what? Say what you want about Hulk Hogan as whatever, but as an uncle, he really tried to consistently get uh Mike Balea, Horace Hogan in there.
Yeah, it's quite odd that Brutus Beefcake isn't signed at this point in time, considering that Hogan is with WWE. Where is Brutus Beefcake and the Nasty Boys? They're not even here, and Hogan is working.
I don't even think has he gotten Mean Gene back yet?
Well, Mean Gene came back at WrestleMania 17. But I don't know how active he was at the company at this point in time.
I
But
love that Hogan and Friends is just a thing that's always there.
so the other names released: Kim Nielsen, Jason Sugarman, Chris Kindred, Craig Zellner, Ron Waterman, and Chad Clear. I think Ron Waterman is the only one that I vaguely recognise because I think he did some decent stuff in either Heartland Wrestling or OVW. But
It was OVW. I've seen a lot of Waterman. Yeah, I don't know anybody else. I think the developmental it's so much different than, let's say there's somebody listening to this that just knows um, what NXT is today. Developmental used to be a thing where you couldn't see it, unless you were actively searching on the internet. There was no way to watch OVW and see who this guy is. So people would just show up randomly and you'd be like, "Oh wow, cool, new guy." And I think that's an element of surprise that's missing in today's era.
so we move on to the ratings war because we're always in a ratings war. So the Raw rating for the 15th of July episode, the July 15th episode of Raw, a 3.8. The SmackDown, 18th of July, a 3.91. So by 0.1 of a point, a tenth of a point, SmackDown gets the victory, their first victory in this series.
Now, I'm gonna throw that all into The Rock. What about you?
I think The Rock's a big pull about it. The Rock, Hulk Hogan. I think it's the fact that they made that, maybe even the fact that they made the announcement about Bischoff coming in, and so they were super excited about the fact that who could potentially be the SmackDown one. That might have added a lot more intrigue into it. Like, oh my god, they brought Bischoff in. Who are they going to make the SmackDown one?
And maybe they thought it would be yeah, I was gonna say somebody like Heyman, but Heyman was on the programming already. Back then, it was, if you were gonna get a surprise, it wasn't going to be, somebody you haven't seen, except if it was the case of a Paul Heyman or somebody who's just never worked there before.
So before we move on to recapping the SmackDown episode in detail, let's recap had the cliff notes of Monday Night Raw. So we've already spoken about Eric Bischoff being named the general manager of Raw. Throughout the night, they teased the idea that Ric Flair, Paul Heyman, and Shane McMahon would potentially become the general manager before Bischoff was announced. During his first promo, Bischoff noted how if he'd have signed Triple H, Nitro would still be on the air.
Well, I think that is the most foreshadowing comment ever made in the history of wrestling. Because Triple H owns Raw after that.
I think it's worth noting that, at least according to Meltzer in The Observer, Bischoff didn't write his script for this promo.
Even more foreshadowing.
Yeah, so basically because of this, his first objective is to sign Triple H to a Raw contract, and Vengeance will find out if he succeeds. So the NWO was disbanded for good. Vince McMahon came out and said that the NWO is no more. There's no more Waltman for a long time. There's no more Nash for a year or so. Well, a year and a half. No, for about half a year, should I say. Michaels is now just left up in the open, really. And the main event of the show was a tag team match. And this is where we talked about the idea last week of Undertaker being tweener. Because Undertaker teaming with the very heel at the time, Brock Lesnar, against Ric Flair and Rob Van Dam.
Say that again. Breathe that in, guys. Undertaker tags with Brock Lesnar versus Rob Van Dam and Ric Flair. That is a dream match city.
It's amazing about Undertaker teaming with the guy who would, several years down the line, break his streak. And it was the way of promoting it. It was the idea that Lesnar had already won King of the Ring, so he was next in line for at SummerSlam he would get an undisputed title match. The Undertaker is the undisputed champion, but at the moment Brock Lesnar is feuding with RVD over the Intercontinental title. Ric Flair and Undertaker still have some beef over their feud from WrestleMania, and at the end of the match, Undertaker and Brock Lesnar won, but Brock Lesnar attacked the Undertaker with the F5 after the bell because he wants to be the world champion, and he's letting basically anybody who could potentially be the world champion by the time SummerSlam rolls around know that he's there, and he's waiting for them.
Yeah, I really think that one of the elements I liked about this era, and a little bit of the Attitude Era, but especially in the Ruthless Aggression era, being world champion meant so much to people. There was so many storylines that were just about, I want to be the world champion. And I think that that is a missed opportunity and a missed element of things that we no longer see today.
So, without further ado, let's move on to the actual review itself. So, the July 18th, 2002, recorded July 16th, episode of SmackDown from the First Union Arena in Wilkes-Barre, Pennsylvania.
Again, we're just loving the Northeast, and I love that.
It's quite interesting because obviously the main event is Rock against Angle, and Angle is very rooted in Pennsylvania.
But
But
it's still The Rock.
yeah, it's still The Rock, so no sort of like crazy Canada land type reaction for Angle instead. So there's the recap of Vince McMahon's announcement of general managers and how Eric Bischoff arrives on Raw, and Bischoff says that he wants to raid SmackDown for The Rock. So this is like an interesting time frame, which McMahon will expand a bit on later, but we're going to be seeing a lot of interaction between both shows and both general managers, at least up until SummerSlam and a little bit beyond.
It's one of the most fundamental pieces of this era, and I genuinely think outside of Teddy and Eric, nobody did it better than Stephanie and Eric.
So we move on to the first match of the night, which is Chris Jericho against John Cena. So this is built up on the fact that John Cena pinned Chris Jericho last week to earn his first win since joining SmackDown. Immediately before the match starts, they cut away to the parking lot area where Mark Lloyd is tentatively waiting for the SmackDown GM to arrive. Now this is something that might come across as me being like in the wrong for this, and I'm totally fine with that assessment. This is a really bad sign for me. The idea that essentially the whole show, and for many shows going forward, it all revolves around the general managers. The general managers are the stars of the show, and not the wrestlers.
I think that was largely to establish the new thing because people had gotten so used to the McMahon, the Vince McMahon era of everything, and I think that was just their way of doing all of that.
So Cena continues with his bright coloured trunk theme with like this yellow like pattern number tonight. There's a terrible drop kick by Cena trying to catch Jericho flying off the top rope, where he barely gets up beyond Jericho's hips. Then he does a German suplex, which is also awful. It's like you just look at these things and just think, wow, I can't believe he didn't incorporate any of this stuff into the 5 moves of doom.
Well, do you think that he was nervous though? Because like John in OVW wasn't that sloppy, like you think he was just nervous about being on the main stage?
Potentially. I mean, it's working with Jericho, so you feel like it's a big deal. You've now got some notoriety behind you. I don't think that I'm not going to have too much of a go at him for having a bad match on this show. I mean, it doesn't make this match enjoyable by any stretch of the imagination. It's not like it's the worst thing I've ever seen, but you have to take into account that he's green and he's still learning the ropes. But it's hard to conflate that with the fact that this is John fucking Cena in 2002. Like, this is the guy who would be head of the company, like the top dog from 2005 until 2000. Well, if he came back now, it would be 2020, but I'd say probably around about 2018 is kind of like the full time period of Cena. And
Really?
yeah, and it's like he's pretty much performing like shit at this point in time. Like, he's either doing stuff which is pretty basic, or he's doing stuff like this which is pretty sloppy. Shows how
You
much
know,
it can change.
but I mean, like it's John, and that almost became part of his charm.
So Cena dominates like 95% of this match and dodges every finishing move that Jericho attempts. And so Jericho gets frustrated and DQ and low blows Cena and gets disqualified. So crappy finish to a match which wasn't even that good to really start with. Jericho then puts Cena in the walls of Jericho until he's forcibly pulled off by the producers. He goes to grab a steel chair and hits Cena repeatedly in the back with it. See, that segment I'd say that would work nowadays because you do see those sort of things happen. It's just at this point in time from 2002, if you're not getting hit in the head with a steel chair, nobody cares.
Right.
So, and I'm not what I'm saying. Don't do that. Don't ever hit anybody in the head with steel chairs. That's stupid and reckless. And we all know, all know better at this point in time. You should have known better in 2002, but you supposedly didn't. But at least you know now. But at this point in time, it's like having Jericho repeatedly hit Cena in the back with steel chair isn't really going to draw the level of sympathy that they're probably hoping for.
Yeah, and if anything, if Cena's getting as over as we think he's getting, they're probably cheering it.
Yeah, absolutely. But we can't hear because of the excellent crowd tweeting that we're getting used to at this point in time. I
Yeah.
don't
Oh
even bring
yeah.
it up anymore because
Because it's a SmackDown. That's what it was.
yeah. So Mark Lloyd approaches the limo that pulls up, assuming it's the SmackDown General Manager, but it's actually Eric Bischoff has arrived. Bischoff ignores Lloyd's questions and just walks into the arena. So we're already getting
Another
the
one
Raw.
of those wrestling tropes from this time period. The mysterious limo has pulled up.
Yeah, that does happen quite a lot, really. Bischoff enters and shakes Randy Orton's hand. Says that he's looking for Hulk Hogan's dressing room. I think it's just quite interesting that it's Randy Orton is the one that he sees and just shakes his hand. It's like a foreshadowing of what would happen going forward.
Oh yeah.
So he goes to Hulk Hogan's dressing room. They have a discussion. Hogan doesn't exactly seem happy to see Eric Bischoff, even though obviously in real life they're like thicker than thieves.
I'm genuinely surprised. I guess they were never around each other long enough, but I'm genuinely surprised they never played on that relationship more, because everywhere else, the Hogan Bischoff relationship is the crux of Hogan's involvement in any other promotion.
Or maybe WWE would be dead by now then if they'd have come together, because it didn't really do wonders for TNA, did it?
That's true.
So they have a discussion. Bischoff shows an interest in signing Edge to Raw. Hogan asks if this is some sort of negotiation, and Eric says it's always a negotiation, and so he leaves. Yeah, it's just a little segment. It's just a nice little nostalgic pop for the WCW guys that were still watching.
Yeah, those poor bastards who left with the invasion angle. If they just would have held on a little more, you know?
Yeah, they could have seen 30 seconds of Eric Bischoff and Hulk Hogan
Yeah, they
interacting
never
backstage.
saw them again.
Do you think that'd be good or bad? Because like it's good in the sense like, oh well, that's a WWE thing, but they also go, oh no, it's like the way it was in '99, 2000 when it all went to hell.
It really depends. I would imagine if people are like big WCW guys, then they love it. But if not, then you just hate it. It's the worst.
So we have the Hurricane versus Chavo Guerrero. So this is the first time we see Chavo in our journey, and he'll
And
become a pretty. I don't say like he's a big deal, but he's a pretty focal point going forward.
and I would argue that he is there because of he's about to put over Rey Mysterio next week.
Essentially, this match is there to build up Guerrero and showcase something about him. Because even though we haven't seen him a lot, they want him to be the first match for Rey Mysterio, which he'll end up being in his debut next week. But in order to make that match somewhat meaningful or to add a bit of emphasis to when Rey Mysterio wins, they have to get Chavo Guerrero over. And Chavo Guerrero and the Hurricane, as we talked about in like the 2001 Wrestling Odyssey, they were feuding with each other over the Cruiserweight Championship at the end of 2001, the end of WWE's reign. It was the constant feud for the Cruiserweight title was Chavo Guerrero against Shane Helms. So these two know how to work together. It's more of like, it's not really the fast-paced, super quick Cruiserweight style that most people would expect, because these two are more traditional wrestlers.
Yeah, and I like this match. I like Chavo. I would grow. There's a very distinct point in my life where I grow not to like Chavo, but that's not until Eddie is passed away. But at this point, I really think Chavo was maybe the most underutilized all-tool player.
It's a good, solid match. It's given a decent amount of time. Guerrero's using like drop kicks to the legs of Hurricane. Hurricane's selling the leg really well throughout it. Guerrero actually applies a Brock lock during this match. I don't know if it has any other name to it. It's like the anchor or something like that. Because I know that's Corey
I believe it's the stretch muffler.
Stretch muffler, right? That was
They were trying to get that move over back in those days. I know Guerrero.
I don't know why they don't do more of it now, because that move looks like it's really, really painful.
Yeah, Brock needs to do more of it because it really would sell
Well,
very well.
if Brock's not going to do it, you give it to McIntyre, you give it to Bobby Lashley. That's could
Yeah,
be like, I mean, you
you give it
don't.
to Keith Lee. Lashley's a good one. You can give it to Keith Lee. You can give it to Dijakovic. Like, that's a great move.
He goes into the STF and Hurricane taps out. So Guerrero gets his victory, cuts a promo about how he's the premier Latin cruiserweight in WWE, not Rey Mysterio. So he challenges Rey Mysterio to fight him and debut next week. So yeah, good match. Liked it, thought it was, and it's like perfect preparation for Guerrero to set him up to get his ass kicked by Rey Mysterio next week.
And that would lead to many Rey Mysterio Chavo Guerrero matches for years to come.
Another limo arrives, but this time it's Vince McMahon, and he says the SmackDown GM might already be here, and so that Mark Lloyd has just been standing out in the cold for absolutely no reason.
That damn Mark Lloyd.
I guess at least it was July, so it can't have been that cold out there, but it is still Pennsylvania. It's like northeast. You can't. How warm can you really get there? Rico gives Bischoff his card, but Bischoff just blows him off because why would he want to sign Rico? Except for the fact that he does sign Rico. But we'll
He
get
would
down
have
with that later.
back Enrico.
Yeah, but he's looking for The Rock, so he runs into Vince McMahon and he talks about how, like, they talk about the new SmackDown GM, says that Bischoff says that no matter who he is, he won't be able to stop him from signing Triple H. They emphasize the he very much on that side of things because, oh my god, it's actually going to be a woman.
Yeah, I think that's the exact reaction they wanted.
Oh god, this again. The Undertaker. So there's essentially in the empty arena, Michael Cole is interviewing The Undertaker. And it's kind of like two of my pet peeves brought together in this same environment of Michael Cole at any point in time and The Undertaker in 2002. And it's as bad as I expect it to be. Undertaker's promos are so boring, they're so meandering. He says the same thing over and over and over again. Talks about how he has, like, he didn't kiss anyone's ass to become undisputed champion. He says that he's champion because no one can beat him in a championship match, which is pretty much like the one qualifier to be champion that no one's beaten you in a championship match.
And it's legit because fast forward to Vengeance, brother still doesn't get pinned.
Yeah, well, I have a lot to say about that as well. But talks about how he kicked Rock and Angle's ass in his yard last week, even though Rock was the one that ended up like standing at the end of it. Says that Angle is living in a world delusion right now, and he's got saying that he's got decisive wins over the Undertaker. Taker says that if they had 1,000 matches in 1,000 days against each other, then Angle couldn't make him tap out once, which is obviously bullshit. But he's still kind of a heel at this point in time. And then says that Vengeance, they'll find out why the ring is his yard. Like, move on. This went on. It feels like it only went on for probably like 4 or 5 minutes, but it still felt like it was twice as long as it needed to be.
Yeah, I like Michael Cole in this era. I think for me, Cole becomes insufferable when he gets to Raw. I like Michael Cole on SmackDown.
Oh yeah, he's definitely far better at this point in time. But it's still Michael Cole. So how good can you really get? Really, at least in my mind. I know some people are like huge fans of him, and I'm not. I don't dislike him in this era. Just it was just still Michael Cole. But I don't.
No,
I
I
don't
get it.
really. I don't really know too much on the commentary anyway. It's nothing that really gets me super pumped about this one anyway. Really, the most exciting thing about commentary for me in these SmackDowns is when Brock Lesnar turns up and it's just Taz saying "Here comes the pain" at the start of it all the time.
I do think Taz and Cole worked well together. I thought this was the best Taz we would ever get.
So we have a tag team match that we actually saw in the very first episode we did, which is Billy and Chuck, now no longer the tag team champions, against Hardcore Holly and the Big Valbowski, or Hardcore Porn as we've dubbed them.
Oh yes, hardcore porn and Billy and Chuck in one match. What is going on here?
This match is fucking bizarre, and there's one specific reason for that. It's an advertisement for Velocity. No, that didn't. Like, I mean, no, it's like they show that Velocity. It's like they talk about Velocity prior to the match, and then there's all the lighting is Velocity. There's a Velocity on the Titantron. It's green lighting instead of the blue lighting. So it's basically they decided to throw this random nothing Velocity match onto an episode of SmackDown. Just like,
I think that has to be because this was going to be a regular Velocity match.
But it's just like, I don't know what they're trying to do. It's like, I mean, I assume they're trying to advertise Velocity, but they put on this match, so is that some sort of indication that I shouldn't care about Velocity? Because this is the sort of match that I can see on that show? Wow, I can't wait to see another Billy Chuck against Hulk Holly and the Big Valbowski.
Well,
Can't
yeah, I'm
wait to
sure
get.
you would see it at least once.
Well, yeah, but that's the point. It's like, why would I turn into Velocity if that's the sort of thing I see? Like, if the Velocity thing was hanging over the Rock versus Kurt Angle match, then I'd think, oh, okay, maybe I'll check out Velocity if these sort of matches are on there. But no, I'm seeing this tag team match again, which does absolutely nothing for me.
Did you have a preferred weekend show? Like they had Heat, Velocity, Metal. I don't know when you started watching and how
I
many of
had Premier
these.
League football to watch at the weekend, so I
Oh
didn't need to.
well,
I
you know
didn't need to
what?
worry about that.
My favorite, I did like Velocity because Velocity would go into the ever wonderful Most Extreme Elimination Challenge, and I'll leave you kids to Google that. Do you know what I'm talking about here?
No, not really.
Okay, real quick. MXC was a Japanese game show that was dubbed over by Americans. It was very silly, very stupid. It was,
Oh, it's Takeshi's Castle.
yeah. But it's dubbed over in English, and it's ridiculous. There's your homework, kids. Google MXC.
Oh yeah, that's yeah, either that or the or Takeshi's Castle. They'll both give you a good time. So this match is pretty standard. It's again nothing really super exciting. There was one point that I thought was pretty funny is that Billy during his entrance he just like gyrate. Well, he doesn't gyrate, but he just hangs on the middle rope in the same way that Peyton Royce does during her entrance now. Just thought Billy. At this point, you just think Billy doesn't want to be in this gimmick anymore, and he's just like goofing off for his own amusement.
We don't have much more of this gimmick to go, do we?
No, it'll be a couple of months. It's a couple of months away still, but or don't get used to them, should I say, because they've got a limited time frame left. Rico hits Big Valbowski with a roundhouse kick in the ring while the ref is distracted, but he kicks out of the pin attempt. Billy's then nailed with the Alabama Slam, and then Valbowski hits the money shot, and Holger Holly and Valbowski win. So now Billy and Chuck are no longer the champions. They're losing left, right, and center.
Yep.
So I don't know how many tag matches they would have had by this point, but this is only the second tag match that Holly and Valbowski have had on the main show at the very least, and they've already beaten the former champions.
And yeah, eventually, I'm sure they would have gotten a title shot, except Val Venus is not on SmackDown much longer.
No, and Hulk Holly isn't operable for much longer either.
That might be why Val Venus is moved over to Raw.
So we have a six-man tag: Hulk Hogan, Edge, and Rikishi teaming up against Lance Storm, Christian, and Test. They're still not referred to as the Un-Americans. I kept referring to them as Un-Americans, but they haven't actually been given that name yet. I don't think they're actually given that name until they debut on Raw.
That's a little silly.
Yeah, they're just referred to occasionally as like the anti-Americans instead. I think that's what Cole kind of refers them to at this point. So Babyface take the initiative early until Test trips Edge from the floor. Hogan gets everyone's super excited for him to get the hot tag. Test hits Edge with a pump handle slam, but he misses the boot and runs into a face plant by Edge. I thought this match was it's what tag team wrestling should be, which is you build up to the hot tag rather than just have the heat on the babyface for 30 seconds and then make the hot tag. It's actually building up to it.
Yeah, it's paint by numbers, but it's pretty good.
So Storm goes for a springboard, but he's caught by Edge into a power slam, a proper power slam, not a John Cena power slam. And then the roof comes off as he tags in Hogan. Storm at one point super kicks Hogan, and they just think again, it's just that whole shock thing of oh my god, they are going to have Lance Storm pin Hulk Hogan, but then obviously kicks out, hulks up. They set Storm up in the corner for the stink face, but Test boots Rikishi. Hogan then sets Test up for the leg drop, but Christian intercepts with an inverted DDT. Edge spears Christian, then hits the execution to Storm, and the babyfaces get the victory. So yeah, fun, six-man tag, nothing offensive, nothing really bad about this match whatsoever. Babyfaces go over, get the crowd happy. Yeah, it's good stuff.
It is good stuff.
Bischoff finally finds The Rock in his dressing room, labelled The Rock. Would have thought that might be the first place he looks. But He says that he wants Rock to be there on Monday, saying that he can take Rock to places beyond his wildest dreams. And Rock says that he will be there on Monday, but only because he's about to win the Undisputed Championship. Because when he wins the Undisputed title, he'll be on both Raw and SmackDown. And so he's saying that he's going to go on any show. He makes some sort of quip about how he wants to go on Frazier and kick Frazier in the nuts.
That's kind of funny.
Rock says that he'd love to have been on Nitro, but he was busy putting Bischoff and his company out of business. And then he walks out.
Traditional WWE. Gotta get that fucking "we beat you" in there.
I think it's fine when it's like The Rock doing it, because it's not like it wasn't true.
That's fair.
But now we move on to probably the most noteworthy segment of the entire show, which is Vince comes out on stage saying that Raw and SmackDown talent can now negotiate with the new GMs as much as they like. So this brings on the giant bidding war of talent and the massive shifts in people moving from one show to the other that we're going to be able to see over the coming weeks and months. So a lot of people have gotten...
They really did make it feel like a brand exchange,
I mean, this is how I think the thing should work, and why the brand splits have always shown so ineffective, because they always just revert back to them both being the same show, the same generic entity, that like it doesn't feel like competition. Whereas at this point, say I know I said about stuff about the GMs taking over, and I wasn't exactly a huge fan of that because it took away from the wrestling. But at least it showed that these two absolutely hated each other, and they wanted to get signed the talent they thought was best for their show.
Right.
And that makes it feel like, yeah, Raw is different from SmackDown, and SmackDown hates Raw, and Raw hates SmackDown, and they actually want to see who gets the most viewers out of it. But within like a couple of years, it just immediately waters down until they're just two different coloured shows of the same product.
Which is always when I started to really hate it.
I mean, that's what happens. Yeah, that's why the current brand split has been such a colossal failure in most people's eyes.
I agree.
Because there is no competition. They're both just the same entities. They both wrestle on the same pay-per-views. They both like promote each other's stuff. They both show clips from each other's shows. There's no competition. There's no... The only time they do competition is this hugely fabricated Survivor Series bullshit.
And even then, it just feels weird.
Yeah, and it comes out of blue. Like, oh, it's November. Better start having these guys supposedly hate each other, even though they don't really care about each other for the rest of the year. But we digress. This is why we're back in 2002, because it means we don't have to think about 2020.
Exactly.
So Vince comes out. He talks about how Bischoff is the right guy for the job because he has innovation and he has moxie for trying to put McMahon out of business. But he says the SmackDown GM also tried to put Vince McMahon out of business and embodies the phrase ruthless aggression.
And that is the only reference to the invasion angle from now until the end of time.
Yeah. So Stephanie McMahon is announced with her new theme music, which is the
she's all good.
It's not her current like Welcome to the Queendom stuff, which is it's not great, but it's the All Grown Up, which I actually quite like. I thought that was good theme music.
Do you know they're actually the same song completely, just different words?
Oh yeah, I guess the tune is pretty similar, but I think the Queendom's a bit more like peppy, isn't it?
But it's just a barely slightly remixed version.
All right. Stephanie McMahon is booed to high heaven because people know what Stephanie's been up to for the last like 2 years, or whatever, and everything that she's done. She's been a heel in the company since 2000. So everyone is pretty negative against her, or even 99, should I say. There's loud slut chants during her promo. This is really terrible, because her voice, she clearly had lost her voice before this segment. Because she was grating, and I mean, Stephanie has a bit of a, should I say, unique voice at the best of times. But in this one, she was so particularly grating because I feel like she was struggling, like she was losing her voice at this point.
She might have been.
I mean, you notice like in the segment that comes after her big promo, where she goes backstage to Bischoff, she can barely get her words out because she's talking at a normal level voice, and that means that she's basically mute at that point.
At the end of the day, I think this run is very important because it got her to stop using the whiny daddy's little girl voice. Like she the whole I'm all grown up thing really did take into effect. Like she was no longer yeah, my dad said and my husband that like she really tried to become her own woman.
So McMahon says she won't allow Bischoff to steal her SmackDown stars, and she mentions The Rock, Hogan, Edge, which I think is a good sign for Edge, and Triple H, and says that she'll be at Vengeance and she'll sign Triple H herself. So but her first act that she's going to make as general manager is throw Bischoff out of the building by force. So she walks backstage, confronts Bischoff, and says she can get walked out or thrown out. And so Bischoff says he'll see her at Vengeance and leaves of his own accord.
Now I always liked the Where Will Triple H Go story. And while his logic for what he's going to do makes a lot of sense, I'm surprised they didn't keep Steph and Hunter together, just based on like what we know today about them wanting to keep couples together.
Well, I think considering the fact that Stephanie was still head of creative, and so she was still getting involved with both shows pretty closely anyway, and the fact that Triple H, by all records, was also turning up for a lot of these creative meetings as well, I think they were still seeing enough of each other.
Right.
One thing that I got out of this finding most of it is that knowing how things progress in the next couple of months, they were really uncomfortably close with each other during this this confrontation.
Oh yeah.
That's a little bit how it's going to end up because we watched it and we've seen it through our own eyes. And if you haven't seen it, we're not going to spoil it just yet, but it gets weird.
Yeah, we'll get there.
And yeah, but it's odd to see them so close face to face when they were just shouting at each other about that stuff. But we'll move on past that point. So GMs are here. Stephanie's now here in the GM role. But let's move on to some cruiserweight action, which is always good, which is Billy Kidman against Tajiri. So this is another just really good match, as you'd expect. There's Taz at some point mentions actually the fact that Bischoff dropped the ball on Kidman in WCW. As a appeal thing of Kidman shouldn't go to Raw because Bischoff didn't know how to use him in WCW, so he should stay on SmackDown instead. So the commentators are now
very
on the act.
Paul Heyman.
Yeah. There's a nice Tajiri applies the tarantula in the middle of the ring ropes instead of in the corner, which was a nice spot because I think they teased that he'd do it beforehand and Kidman got out of it and then they did it later on. That's always no matter if Tajiri was heel or babyface, he always got a good reaction with the tarantula.
Yeah, it's just a cool looking move.
Kidman hits an Ushigoroshi, which I think is the first time I've ever noted seeing that move.
It might have been the first time on American soil that the move was used.
Tajiri hits a super kick and then he does a standing moonsault, but then he goes for a top rope moonsault, but Kidman moves out of the way and Tajiri lands on his feet. Kidman then nails a knee cane bomb and then hits the shooting star press to win. Again, it was short, but it was good for what it was.
Yeah, love it because it's the kind of action I like, but it's very quick.
Noble ambushes, Kidman fights him back, but then he's hit by the green mist by Tajiri, and that allows Noble to hit a powerbomb on him, and then Nidia slaps him for good measure, and so the Cruiserweight Champion has the advantage going into their match at Vengeance. Probably should have mentioned earlier, this is the go-home show for Vengeance.
What's an interesting thing that they mention is you'll be able to watch this event on WWE.com.
Did they really? I didn't really clock that thing.
Yeah, there's an ad for it. You can watch on WWE.com for $24.99, and I just think that that's amazing because when you look at the internet quality in 2002, the fact that you thought you were going to be able to stream a pay-per-view is pretty ballsy.
Yeah. I wonder how that actually worked out. I'm pretty sure most people would have just gone the traditional route by this point.
I'm guessing it didn't, and that's why you don't typically hear about this kind of stuff.
So we move backstage where Jericho walks into Stephanie's office and he says that he's so happy to see her because they were a team only a couple of months ago.
Right, and they have all that history together.
So man notes how brave and considerate Jericho was to give up his match with Edge at Vengeance. So she's going to reward him like Vince promised, but instead of what he would have probably won, which is the world title shot or extra money or a week off or anything like that, he's going to get his match with Edge next week on SmackDown. And Jericho feigns being happy and excited about fighting Edge, and he leaves, closes the door behind him, and calls her a bitch as he leaves. But they bleep it out because, it's still network television.
Good thing here. I do wish, in retrospect, we would have seen this match on pay-per-view, but I'm glad we're getting to cover it on SmackDown next week.
So another Rey Mysterio hype package. He'll be here next week. Good to look forward to that. And now we can do a breakdown. They do a breakdown of the Vengeance card. So that's something that you can look forward to on the Patreon side of things. If you sign up for the Darkcast tiers, you will be doing a review of Vengeance 2002 on that show. So you can, through this rundown, we can see what you can have to look forward to. So we have the Undisputed Title Triple Threat, The Rock versus Kurt Angle versus The Undertaker.
Fantastic.
Tag Team title match, Hulk Hogan and Edge against Lance Storm and Christian.
I'm kind of really enjoying Hulk Hogan in this role.
We get Triple H's decision on whether he's joining Raw or SmackDown.
Would have been better with the NWO, but
We have Booker T versus The Big Show in a no disqualification, no count out match. We have Chris Benoit and Eddie Guerrero against Bubba Ray and Spike Dudley in a tag team tables match.
Everything about that match sounds good, except I'm not sure how I feel about it being Spike instead of Devon.
We have the Intercontinental title, RVD defending against Brock Lesnar.
You would really think Brock Lesnar is about to win the Intercontinental title.
And the Cruiserweight Championship match, which is Jamie Noble defending against Billy Kidman.
And it's a good match.
So that's what we have to look forward to at Vengeance. But before they finish running down the card, Kurt Angle's music hits, and we're going to have what would any point be a dream match, which is The Rock against Kurt Angle, 1-on-1 on the main event of SmackDown.
Yeah, this match has main event pay-per-views before this. I don't think it goes on to main event anything after, because Rock is shortly out of the company, but this is as big as it gets.
Yeah, I think this might be. I mean, I don't know whether they do anything in the build-up towards SummerSlam, but for all intents and purposes, this might be the final one-on-one match The Rock and Kurt Angle ever have. So, gonna have to savour it. There's a brilliant sign in the crowd of a Dr. Evil's head on Kurt Angle's body.
That's funny.
Yeah, there's some good signs at this point in time. It's not the point where they actually allowed signs.
Yeah, well, they allowed signs and people aren't looking at cell phones, so yeah.
So Angle cuts a promo about his victory at Vengeance as a foregone conclusion, and he's already made the Undertaker tap. So Undertaker rides down to ringside and takes a seat next to commentary before The Rock comes out. Before Rock even gets announced, he charges the ring immediately and takes the fight to Angle, sends him flying out of the ring. At one point, Rock bounces Angle's head off the Undertaker's bike. So
good play on the triple threat there.
Like, that this is an Attitude Era main event, and you know why it's an Attitude Era main event?
Because they spend a lot of time outside?
Exactly. We know this from 2001. If you're fighting on the outside for about half the match, you know that this is Attitude Era stuff. But there is actually some decent wrestling as well. There's a great belly-to-belly throw by The Rock at one point, and then 3 consecutive German suplexes by Angle. Angle taunts Taker at ringside. There's a running crossbody by Angle, which is then floated over by The Rock. I don't think I've ever seen Angle hit a running crossbody before, but it was nice for the time to see it. They do this do a spot which we never see nowadays, which is the hands up in the pass out spot. I probably said that, I absolutely butchered the way I said that, but it's not the point where you're in a sleeper hold and you hold
I
arms
got
up 3 times.
They're checking the arms.
You never ever see that nowadays.
I miss that so much. It's a cheap spot to get, a good bit of heat going.
I love those sort of things because it's the least amount of effort and it gets the hugest reaction. That is what pro wrestling is. That's the encapsulation of pro wrestling. Do the least amount of stuff for the biggest amount of reaction.
And
then
so
I can't really hate Hulk Hogan as a wrestler as much as I want to.
And then it became do the most amount of stuff for the least amount of reaction.
The career of Cedric Alexander.
Yeah. Oh, yes.
We have Angle scrambles to the ropes after a sharpshooter has been applied. I do like the fact that The Rock's sharpshooter is not the best looking sharpshooter in the world. they're doing the idea of like Angle potentially tapping out as well because the whole storyline's been around Angle making people tap out. Rock pushes the referee away briefly to punch Angle in the quote unquote medals.
Yeah,
So yeah, but that's something that, again, that's a very Rock and Austin thing. They're baby faces that wantonly cheat during matches.
and people love it because wrestling, or specifically 2002 wrestling.
Yeah, this ends up with Angle standing close to Taker, and so Rock comes in with a clothesline trying to hit Angle, but he keeps going with his momentum and he clotheslines Undertaker over the barricade. So they continue wrestling in the ring, a nice float over DDT by The Rock. Rock then knocks Taker off the apron and then goes for the people's elbow, but Undertaker jumps in and it's a DQ. Obviously, it's a main event match between The Rock and Angle before both of them are fighting for the world title. Of course, it ends with a DQ.
Would not happen today. Somebody
Uh,
would win, and they'd just be like, "Oh, wait to see that guy get his win back this weekend."
I think if it's AEW, I completely agree with you. I think with WWE, they'd still do that sort of thing.
Uh,
Uh,
lots of stuff here that, man, I really miss. I miss the simplicity of the WWE main event style that I think around the, like, maybe by 2010, 2011, we were kind of past, but I miss the really simple things that used to work in this era.
yeah, it is very. I There's something I noticed about it, which I was actually quite surprising. There's a weird lack. I don't want to say lack of selling because they do sell very well, but it's very quick in that once they've done a move and the guy sold it, it's moving on immediately to whatever the next move or hold is. It's actually pretty fast paced from what I would expect from a main event style.
I would agree with that.
I mean, again, it is The Rock and Kurt Angle, and both these guys are workers, and they do want to get stuff done in the ring as well. It's not like it is an Undertaker Hogan match or whatever, where you can imagine they'll be rolling around on the ring. They'd spend as much time rolling around on the mat as they do standing up and actually doing stuff. The Rock and Taker brawl after the DQ. Angle hits Taker in the back with a chair, and Rock then attempts the rock bottom. The Angle counters into an ankle lock, and interestingly enough, The Rock taps out to the ankle lock. So
Yeah, and they were really making Angle a big star here, and arguably, like, how could you not? He should have been positioned as the wrestling machine from the get go, but I think they were too busy positioning him as a a nerd because the baby faces at that time were such hard ass badasses.
So Angle has the last laugh, and he's like the one standing tall at the end of the show. So he's got the most momentum going into Vengeance for the title match. And even though it was a weak DQ finish, which nobody really likes, it's still probably one of the best matches of the entire journey so far. I mean, put Rock and Angle against each other at any point in time, it's probably going to be a great match.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
So, but we're not quite done yet because there's still a bigger star that we need to talk about, and that's Triple H, obviously.
Well,
So
because it's all about the game, Cal.
this is the one and only time we're going to see Triple H on SmackDown in this entire journey, which
It's
is
unfortunate.
Mark Lloyd is running after someone like behind the scenes, and it turns out to be Triple H is about to enter a limo. He basically asks him outright who Triple H is going to sign with, and then Stephanie comes in and approaches. Stephanie wants to talk business with Triple H, but Triple H says that how like she doesn't want her lawyer present because they're still like in kayfabe going through a divorce at this point in time.
Leads to a great moment on Sunday.
So Triple H says he'll make his decision at Vengeance, and before he leaves, he looks Stephanie up and down, and you sort of think that he's going to give some sort of witty compliment or something along those lines. He says that, "Have you gained weight?" That's just
Yeah,
like,
it's
yeah, there's no love lost between their two.
fantastic.
But Stephanie, because she's in a position of power and she wants to sign him to be on her show, she just laughs at it and moves on with it rather than screaming at him. But then she sees in the limo Eric Bischoff is already in there. And he just laughs and says that he'll see Stephanie on Sunday, and so Stephanie's frustrated because it seems like Bischoff has already got his hands on Triple H.
And I think I like the way that they tease that because they pay it off beautifully at the pay per view. And Triple H looks like the hottest commodity. And regardless of what you think about him in this era, he he is the hottest commodity in a lot of ways. Like, everybody else that can be signed to a specific place already was. And I just loved it. I love this. Like, how much fun is this episode of SmackDown?
I think that it's obviously it's very eventful, and that's a good thing about it. It feels like it's a show that really matters, like this one in particular. I can't say that I'm super enamored with it because there was so much talking. There's so much Bischoff. There's so much Stephanie. It just the reason why I wanted to go back to 2002 is because I wanted to see a load of great wrestling. I did see a great wrestling match in this one with The Rock and Angle, and I saw some other good matches like the Hurricane against Chavo and Kidman against Tajiri. They were good matches, but I just feel like give them 5 more minutes and maybe we just have one less Stephanie segment or one less Bischoff interaction.
What I will say about those segments is they were able to do a lot of those because the people who were doing the talking segments could do them well.
Yeah, I agree with that. If that sort of thing was done with people nowadays, and I'm not saying everyone is a bad promo nowadays, but it would be so much more heavily scripted. It would be so much more wooden and unnatural.
I agree.
At least these interactions made sense. And at the end of the day, it was a big deal that Stephanie and Bischoff are now in charge of the two shows. So you do have to give them a bit of airtime to like explain their side of things and try and introduce them to new characters. Because at this point in time, everyone hates Stephanie, but she's going down a course of trying to make her a babyface on SmackDown. So they need time to try and build that character up. Whereas Bischoff is just Bischoff and he's a heel. And he'll always be a heel.
And they did, I think, a great job eventually of turning Steph. Like, that year that she spends as GM is a great year for SmackDown. And I think that's part of why we're going back to this era, because it just works.
I think it was great up until the point she started feuding with them. Specifically the matches. The actual original stuff with like beforehand was okay, but then the actual match was uncomfortable as hell.
And I think Steph is a good example of when a babyface does their best to remain neutral.
But
you know,
yeah, oh yeah, she's not like she doesn't curry favor everyone. I mean, she at one point in 2002 we're going to see her suspend Brock Lesnar when he's reaching like a height of his popularity.
She suspends Brock Lesnar. She was a babyface, but she wasn't like overly babyface. She would, give deserving heels their shot. I just think that's what I want from a GM, a neutral character.
So that wraps up episode 4 of the journey. So we'll just have a little bit of a preview of what we can expect in episode 5. So episode 5 is the show Past Vengeance. So hopefully you check out the episode on Patreon if you signed up to that tier and you listen to our review of that, so you'll be well prepared for that one. It'll be the July the 25th, 2002 edition. The main event is going to be a steel cage match between Edge and Chris Jericho.
Nice.
Yeah, it's a good mouth-watering one to savour. The debut of Rey Mysterio on SmackDown.
I think these two matches do more to set the tone for the rest of 2002 than anything else, because to this day, one of the ending scenes of the show is still replayed in video packages.
Yeah, absolutely. We have an unbelievable World Tag Team Championship match. Lance Storm and Christian, which might have actually spoiled the Vengeance result, but can't really help at this point. Against The Rock and Hulk Hogan.
What? That's like, wow! Can you imagine saying Rock and Hulk Hogan tag team champions?
I know, it's like, it is just pretty ridiculous. You have Kurt Angle against Mark Henry in a prelude to their amazing 2006 Royal Rumble main event.
I will tell you right now that the Royal Rumble match was a lot better than this.
And also, we don't see the debut match, but we see the debut arrival of Brock Lesnar on SmackDown.
Yep.
So, another notable week, a lot to look forward to. So hopefully you'll join us again for that journey. Hopefully you're enjoying the journey so far. Leave your comments below what you thought about this episode, what you thought about this show, and anything else you're looking forward to, what other stuff you want to see from the channel. Everything below, just even the comments, or join up to the Mega Maniacs, leave some thoughts there. follow us on Facebook, Twitter, send us a tweet, send us a message or whatever. Just let us know how we're doing and what stuff you want to see from us going forward. If you want to support us financially, we've obviously mentioned the Patreon. If you sign up for the Darkcast tier, you'll be able to hear Vengeance and any other Darkcasts we're putting out over the course of each month. You can also sign up for the Peak of Poison tier, which is a $50 tier, where you can basically request us to do anything. If you want to go back and we want to watch episodes of Velocity, or you want to see us extend the journey beyond Paul Heyman's run into 2003 stuff or anything like that, you want to see us do reviews of TNA shows or other pay-per-views, then go right ahead, sign up for that one. But even if you sign up for $1, it all just goes a long way to giving us motivation and keeping us excited to produce content for you guys. But other ways you can support us financially, there's the Redbubble and TeePublic stores where you can buy merchandise, buy t-shirts, buy shower curtains, buy masks in this very dangerous era that we're living in right now. So even though you have to wear a mask, or at least you should wear a mask and be socially responsible, it doesn't mean you don't have to look bad while doing it.
That's right. I mean, you are gonna look so stylish in your however bell mask. Like, nobody's gonna get it, but you know what? You're gonna get it, and you can ding the however bell that's on your face.
And there's other stuff, obviously, you want to follow our blue brand, as it were, which is Fanboys Anonymous. That's like Tony's big geek culture project, and you can follow them or support them on Patreon as well, and buy some of their merchandise as well. If you want to hear the latest movie news, if there is any latest movie news, then in this current era, then you can check out all that stuff there. Rob, you want to check out your stuff?
Yeah, you can check out my stuff. You can go to WrestleZone and go to Fightful. We're following the news of the day, and you can check me out on Twitter and Instagram at DeFelice.
Yeah, and you can follow me on Twitter at Wigmeister14. Make sure you head over to smarkoutmoment.com and you basically just check out all the great articles that are on there, all the latest news and gossip. Check out the heel and face turn and tell Tony why there's something wrong on there, because he doesn't have enough work to already do.
That's right. You gotta make Tony really work harder. That's the goal we're trying to get at here.
Yeah, absolutely. Because we're doing this, and so we're really doing all the work on this.
That's right. So he needs to work harder. That's right.
But no, seriously, don't do it. We don't want him to die.
Yeah, please don't make Tony work harder.
But hopefully you enjoyed this edition. Hopefully you look forward to the next one as well. You'll join us for episode 5. And we'll see you then. Thanks very much for listening. But for now, this has been another Smark Out Moment, and we are being counted out.